My name is Haley Mitchell, and I'm 19 years old. I never thought my own family would leave me to die. But that rainy night, trapped in the upside-down wreckage of our SUV, blood streaming down my face and my leg twisted unnaturally, I heard them walking away. My brother Jason had crashed the car while drunk, and my parents chose him over me. They left me unconscious, bleeding, with a broken leg, a decision that would forever change all of our lives. Before I continue my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you want to hear more stories of survival and justice. Growing up in our suburban Connecticut home, there was always an unspoken hierarchy in the Mitchell family. My brother Jason, 3 years older at 22, had always been the golden child. My parents, Karen and David Mitchell, created a world where Jason's success was the family's success, and his failures were merely temporary setbacks that needed our collective support. I existed in the margins of this family portrait, neither praised nor particularly noticed unless I did something wrong. Jason had been developing a drinking problem since his sophomore year of college. What started as typical college partying had evolved into something more concerning by his senior year. He'd call me sometimes, slurring his words at 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. When I tried to talk to my parents about it, my concerns were brushed aside. "He's just enjoying college, Haley," my mother would say, her smile tight. "Not everyone wants to be so serious all the time." My father would typically add, "Your brother maintains his grades. He knows his limits." But Jason didn't know his limits. He'd been pulled over once for suspected DUI, but my father, a well-connected attorney, had managed to make it go away. This intervention hadn't been treated as the wake-up call it should have been. Instead, it reinforced Jason's belief that consequences were things that happened to other people. The day of the accident was meant to be a celebration. Jason had graduated from college with a business degree, and my parents had organized a dinner at Bellini's, the fanciest Italian restaurant in our town. I'd come home from my freshman year at State specifically for this event, despite having a final exam the following week. To Jason, my father toasted, raising his glass of wine. "The future of Mitchell Consulting starts today." My father had always planned for Jason to join his financial consulting firm. The position had been held for him, regardless of his qualifications. My mother beamed beside them, while I forced a smile and raised my water glass. I had to drive us all home, or so I thought. The wine flowed freely throughout dinner. Jason moved from wine to whiskey as the evening progressed. My mother sipped steadily at her glasses, while my father, normally more restrained, indulged as well. By dessert, I was the only sober person at the table. "I'll drive us home," I offered, seeing Jason's flushed face and slightly unfocused eyes. "Nonsense," my father replied, waving his hand dismissively. "Jason hasn't had that much. Besides, it's his celebration." "Dad, he's had at least 4 drinks that I've counted," I protested quietly. "Don't be such a buzzkill, Haley," Jason smirked, the cruel edge to his smile showing when our parents weren't looking. "I'm fine." My mother patted my hand condescendingly. "He's just celebrating, honey. It's a big night for him." "Being a designated driver doesn't mean you can't have a few drinks," my father added nonsensically, revealing his own impairment. As we left the restaurant, the clouds had gathered, and a light drizzle had started. I made one last attempt as Jason pulled out the keys to my father's Mercedes SUV. "Please, I can drive. I haven't had anything to drink." "Jesus, Haley, stop being so dramatic," Jason snapped, loudly enough that my parents frowned at me, not him. "Haley, enough," my mother said firmly. "Get in the car." I climbed into the back seat behind Jason, my stomach churning with anxiety. My father sat beside Jason in the passenger seat, while my mother took the seat behind my father. As Jason pulled out of the parking lot, I could see his movements were exaggerated, his turns too wide. The rain began to intensify, sheets of water cascading down the windshield. Jason turned the wipers to their highest setting, but visibility was still poor. He was driving too fast for the conditions, and I gripped the door handle tightly. "Jason, slow down," I said, unable to keep quiet as he narrowly missed sideswiping a parked car. "I know how to drive in the rain," he snapped, but he was squinting through the windshield, his reactions delayed. My parents remained silent, my father occasionally giving directions but never suggesting that Jason slow down or pull over. The atmosphere in the car grew tense, but not because they were concerned about Jason's driving. They were annoyed at me for pointing it out. As we turned onto the winding road that led to our neighborhood, the rain turned into a downpour. The headlights barely penetrated the darkness, and Jason leaned forward, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. We were going at least 15 miles over the speed limit on a road that demanded caution even in good weather. "Jason, seriously, pull over and let me drive," I pleaded, genuine fear gripping me as we approached a sharp curve. "Haley, that's enough," my mother snapped. Those were the last words spoken before our lives changed forever. Jason took the curve too fast. I felt the exact moment when the tires lost their grip on the wet asphalt. There was a sickening sensation of sliding sideways, my brother overcorrecting in panic. My father shouted something, and my mother screamed as the SUV spun completely around. Time slowed down. I could see the guardrail approaching through the side window. The impact was deafening, metal tearing against metal. But the guardrail only slowed us, it didn't stop the vehicle. We broke through and began rolling down the steep embankment beyond. I remember fragments of those terrible seconds. The sensation of being upside down, suspended by my seatbelt. The shattering of glass. A sharp pain in my leg that made me cry out. My head striking the window beside me. And then darkness. I don't know how long I was unconscious. When I came to, everything was wrong. The world was upside down. Rain was pouring in through the shattered windows. The metallic taste of blood filled my mouth, and something warm was running down my face. The pain in my right leg was excruciating, a white-hot agony that made it impossible to think clearly. "Mom?" I called weakly. "Dad?" No one answered from inside the car. Disoriented, I tried to make sense of my surroundings. The front of the SUV was crushed against a large tree. Both airbags had deployed and now hung deflated from the dashboard. I could see movement, people outside the vehicle. I heard voices then, urgent and hushed. "We have to get him away from here," my father's voice, strained but clear. "What about Haley?" my mother asked, her voice coming from somewhere outside the car. "She's out cold," my father replied. "If the police come now, they'll test Jason's blood alcohol. He'll go to jail, Karen. His entire future will be destroyed. We can't just leave her," my mother protested, but her voice lacked conviction. "She's wearing her seatbelt. She's secure in the vehicle," my father's lawyer voice had taken over, clinical and detached. "We'll call anonymously for help once we get Jason somewhere safe. They'll find her. She'll be okay. She's bleeding, David. Head wounds always bleed a lot. We need to make a decision right now." I tried to call out, to tell them I was conscious, that I could hear them, but all that came out was a weak moan that couldn't have carried beyond the crushed vehicle. "What do we tell people?" my mother asked, already giving in. "We say Jason wasn't with us. He was at a friend's house." We swerved to avoid a deer. I heard the shuffling of movement, the sound of my brother's voice, groggy but walking. They were leaving. My own parents and brother were walking away, leaving me trapped, injured, and alone. "We'll call anonymously for help. They'll find her," my mother repeated my father's words, as if trying to convince herself. Their voices grew fainter. I tried again to call out, but the pain in my chest made it difficult to breathe, let alone shout. I heard car doors slamming in the distance, another vehicle they must have called or flagged down, and then nothing but the sound of rain hitting the wreckage around me. The reality of my situation began to sink in. I was alone in an overturned vehicle, at the bottom of an embankment, in the pouring rain. My leg was definitely broken, I could see the unnatural angle even in the dim light. The pain was becoming unbearable, waves of it washing over me with each heartbeat. I tried to reach my phone in my pocket, but the movement sent such intense pain through my body that I nearly blacked out again. My seatbelt, which had saved my life, now held me firmly in place, the pressure uncomfortable against my injured ribs. Time became fluid, stretching and contracting. Sometimes I was aware of the rain, the pain, the precariousness of my situation. Other times, I drifted into a half-conscious state where past memories mixed with present fears. I thought about the countless times my parents had chosen Jason over me, but never had the stakes been so high, the betrayal so complete. The temperature was dropping, or perhaps it was shock setting in. I began to shiver uncontrollably, each tremor sending fresh pain through my broken leg and bruised body. Water was pooling in the car, soaking through my clothes. I wondered if anyone would find me in time, or if my parents' promise to call for help had been a lie they told themselves to ease their guilt. In those dark moments, drifting between consciousness and oblivion, I confronted the possibility of dying alone in that wreckage. Not because help wouldn't come eventually, but because my injuries might be too severe to wait. The internal bleeding I could feel but not see. The growing cold. The shock that was making my thoughts increasingly disconnected. "Please," I whispered to no one, my voice barely audible even to myself. "Please help me." The darkness at the edges of my vision threatened to close in completely. I fought against it, knowing instinctively that if I lost consciousness again, I might never wake up. But the battle was becoming harder to fight. My eyelids grew heavier. The pain began to fade into a disturbing numbness. Just before I slipped away again, I thought I saw headlights on the road above, a brief flash cutting through the rain and darkness. But I couldn't be sure if it was real or just another hallucination as the world faded to black around me. The rhythmic beeping was the first thing I became aware of. Before I opened my eyes, before I remembered what had happened, I heard that steady electronic pulse marking my survival. When I finally managed to lift my heavy eyelids, the harsh fluorescent lighting of a hospital room greeted me. "She's awake," a male voice said from somewhere to my left. I turned my head slowly, wincing at the pain the movement caused. A man in his 30s with kind eyes and a concerned expression was standing by my bedside. He wasn't wearing hospital attire, just jeans and a rain-spotted jacket. "Who?" I managed to rasp, my throat painfully dry. "My name is Ryan Thompson," he said, leaning forward slightly. "I found you in the wreck. The nurse said I could wait until you woke up." A nurse appeared on my other side, checking the monitors and my "4. How are you feeling, Haley?" "I'm going to call the doctor in." As the nurse left, fragments of memories began flooding back. The crash. The pain. My family walking away. "Water?" I whispered. Ryan helped me take small sips through a straw. As my mind cleared, I studied his face. "You found me?" He nodded, his expression grave. "I was driving home from a late shift. Saw the broken guardrail and stopped to check. Almost missed the car down the embankment, but my headlights caught a reflection from the wreckage." "How long?" "You'd been there about 2 hours when I found you," he said, his voice tightening. "The paramedics said." He hesitated. "They said you might not have lasted much longer. You'd lost a lot of blood, and the temperature was dropping." 2 hours. My family had left me there for 2 hours before Ryan happened to drive by. When I got down to the car, I couldn't believe what I was seeing, Ryan continued. "You were alone, trapped upside down. I called 911 immediately. Stayed with you, talking to you even though you were unconscious, until the paramedics arrived." Tears welled in my eyes, both from gratitude toward this stranger and from the crushing weight of my family's betrayal. "Thank you," I whispered. "Don't thank me," he said, shaking his head. "Any decent person would have done the same." His eyes met mine, and I could see the unasked question there. How had I ended up alone in that wreck? Before I could decide what to tell him, the doctor entered, a middle-aged woman with a clipboard and an efficient manner. "Haley, I'm Dr. Winters. You're at Mercy General. You've been through quite an ordeal, but you're stable now." Ryan excused himself, promising to check on me later if that was okay. I nodded, grateful for his kindness. Dr. Winters explained my injuries in clinical detail: a compound fracture of my right femur that had required surgical intervention, 3 broken ribs, a moderate concussion, a lacerated spleen that they'd managed to repair rather than remove, various cuts requiring multiple stitches, and significant blood loss. "You're very lucky to be alive," she concluded. "If Mr. Thompson hadn't found you when he did." She left the sentence unfinished. "My family," I said, my voice stronger now. "Have they been notified?" A flicker of something, confusion? Concern, crossed her face. "We haven't been able to reach them. The contact information in your wallet led to unanswered calls. The police are still trying." I closed my eyes briefly. Of course they weren't answering. They were busy establishing Jason's alibi, making sure their story was straight. "There are some police officers who would like to speak with you when you're up to it," Dr. Winters added. "They have some questions about the accident." "I can talk to them now," I said, knowing that every hour that passed was another hour for my family to solidify their lies. 2 officers came in shortly after Dr. Winters left. Officer Reyes and Officer Martinez introduced themselves and expressed their concern for my condition before beginning their questions. "Can you tell us what happened last night?" Officer Reyes asked, notebook ready. I took a deep breath, ignoring the pain it caused in my ribs. "We were coming back from my brother's graduation dinner. My brother Jason was driving. He was drunk, had been drinking whiskey all night. My parents were in the car too. It was raining heavily. Jason was driving too fast, lost control on a curve. We crashed through the guardrail and rolled down the embankment." I paused, the next part almost too painful to articulate. When I regained consciousness, I was alone in the car. I heard my parents outside. They made a decision to take my brother away from the scene. They didn't want him to get a DUI. They left me there, said they'd call anonymously for help." The officers exchanged glances. "Are you saying your family abandoned you at the crash site?" Officer Martinez asked, her tone careful, as if she couldn't quite believe what she was hearing. "Yes," I said simply, a tear sliding down my cheek. "They left me to protect my brother from a DUI charge." "This is a very serious accusation," Officer Reyes said. "We found no other passengers reported or evidence of other occupants." "They're lying," I said. "Check the airbags. Both front ones deployed, driver and passenger. Check for fingerprints, DNA. My father was in the passenger seat. My mother was behind him. Jason was driving." They took detailed notes of everything I told them, asked about the restaurant, what everyone had been drinking, the approximate time of the crash. "We'll investigate this thoroughly," Officer Martinez assured me. "In the meantime, is there someone we can call for you? Another relative or friend?" I thought about it, the full impact of my isolation hitting me. My closest friends were at college, hundreds of miles away. My extended family mostly lived in other states. I'd been so embedded in the toxic Mitchell family unit that I'd never built a strong support system of my own. "Not right now," I admitted. "But I'll be okay." After they left, a social worker named Lydia came to see me. She explained that given my age and injuries, there were services available to help me navigate my recovery and the financial aspects of my care. When I told her about my family's abandonment, she didn't seem shocked, just deeply saddened. "Unfortunately, this isn't the first case of family betrayal I've seen," she said, "though it is one of the most extreme. We'll make sure you're not alone in this." The next day, a hospital volunteer brought me my phone, which had been recovered from the wreck. It was cracked but functional. There were no messages or missed calls from my parents or Jason. I stared at the screen, the absence of their concern somehow more painful than their physical abandonment had been. I decided to call them. After everything, I needed to hear them try to explain themselves. My mother answered on the 4th ring. "Haley?" Her voice was cautious, lacking any of the relief or concern you'd expect from a mother whose injured daughter was calling from the hospital. "I'm alive," I said, my voice flat. "In case you were wondering." "Oh, honey, we've been so worried. We've been trying to find out which hospital they took you to." The lie was so smooth, so practiced, that for a moment I almost doubted my own memories. But the pain in my body was real. Ryan Thompson finding me alone was real. "Stop it," I cut her off. "I heard you and Dad. I was conscious when you decided to take Jason and leave me there." There was a long silence. "Then, you don't understand the situation, Haley. Your brother's entire future was at stake. And my life wasn't?" My voice broke. "We called for help," she insisted, the lie weaker now. "No, you didn't. A stranger found me 2 hours after you left. The doctors said I could have died." Another pause. "We need to discuss this as a family. Your father and I will come to the hospital tomorrow." "Which one are you at?" I told her, then hung up without saying goodbye. I lay back against the pillows, exhausted from the brief conversation, and let the tears come freely. Not just for the physical pain and trauma, but for the death of what I'd thought my family was, or could be. True to her word, my mother arrived the next day with my father in tow. The sight of them walking into my hospital room, perfectly put together, expressions carefully arranged into masks of parental concern, made me physically nauseous. My father carried flowers, as if a bouquet could make up for leaving me to die. "Haley, sweetheart," my mother rushed forward as if to embrace me, but stopped short when she saw my expression. "We've been so worried." "Have you?" I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. 2 days, no calls, no texts. "We've been dealing with the insurance company, talking to the police," my father said, setting the flowers on the side table. "It's been chaotic." I stared at him, this man who had taught me about right and wrong, who had once carried me on his shoulders, who had abandoned me without a second thought. "Where's Jason?" I asked. My parents exchanged a glance. "He's at home, resting," my mother said. "He's very upset about the accident." Upset about the accident, or upset that he might face consequences for driving drunk and nearly killing me? "Haley," my father's voice took on the authoritative tone he used in court, "we need to get our stories straight. The police have been asking questions." "Stories straight?" I repeated incredulously. "You mean you want me to lie for you? Like you're lying for Jason?" "You don't understand what's at stake here." My father leaned closer, lowering his voice even though we were alone in the room. "Jason is starting at my firm next month. A DUI conviction, especially one involving a serious accident, would destroy his career before it begins. He'd lose his license, possibly face jail time. So instead, what? I was driving? Is that the story you've been telling?" My mother shook her head quickly. "No, no. We've told them Jason wasn't with us at all. He was at his friend Mike's place. We said your father was driving and swerved to avoid a deer." The calculated nature of their lies stunned me. "You've already created an alibi for him." "Mike has confirmed it," my father said, as if this was something to be proud of. "As far as anyone knows, Jason spent the evening celebrating with his college friends." "And what about me?" I asked. "What's my role in this fiction you've created?" "You just need to say you don't remember much," my mother said, reaching for my hand. I pulled it away. "That happens with concussions. You woke up in the hospital, everything was confusing. You thought Jason was there because we'd been at his graduation dinner, but it was just the 3 of us driving home." I looked from one parent to the other, searching for any sign of shame or regret in their faces. There was none. Just the expectation that I would fall in line, as I always had. "You do realize what you're asking me to do is a crime, right?" I said to my father. "Filing a false police report, obstruction of justice." "You're a lawyer, Dad. You know this better than anyone. It's only a crime if you get caught, he replied, his expression hardening. And nobody will look too closely at a simple car accident if we all tell the same story. A simple car accident? My voice rose despite the pain it caused. I nearly died. I have a broken leg, broken ribs, internal injuries. The doctor said if that man hadn't found me when he did, I might not have survived. We're not saying it wasn't serious, my mother interjected. We're devastated about your injuries, Haley. But what's done is done. We can't change what happened, only how we move forward. What's done is done, I repeated, the words tasting bitter. You left me to die, and that's your response? What's done is done. We didn't leave you to die, my father snapped, his composure slipping. We made a calculation. We knew someone would find you eventually. Eventually, I echoed. And if eventually had been too late? Neither of them answered. I told the police the truth, I said finally. I told them Jason was driving drunk. I told them you both took him from the scene and left me there. The color drained from my mother's face. My father's eyes narrowed dangerously. You what? He hissed. I told them the truth, I repeated. I'm not going to lie for you. Not this time. My father stood up abruptly. Do you have any idea what you've done? The police came by the house this morning asking questions. Jason could be facing felony charges. Good, I said, surprising myself with the vehemence in my voice. He should be. He drove drunk and could have killed all of us. And then you two made it worse by leaving me there. We're your parents, my mother said, tears welling in her eyes. Everything we've done has been for this family. No, I corrected her. Everything you've done has been for Jason. I'm part of this family too, but you've never once put me first. You left me bleeding and unconscious in a wrecked car to protect him. That's not what parents do. My father checked his watch in a deliberate gesture of dismissal. We'll need to speak to our attorney. This is a mess, Haley, and you've made it worse. I've made it worse? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I'm not the one who committed multiple crimes here. We're going to go now, my father said, taking my mother's arm. When you've had time to think about the implications of what you're doing to this family, give us a call. That's it? You're leaving? Again? The parallel wasn't lost on me. What do you want us to say, Haley? My mother asked, her tears now falling freely. We can't change what happened. I want you to admit what you did was wrong, I said. I want you to tell the police the truth. I want Jason to face consequences for once in his life. My father's face hardened. That's not going to happen. They left without saying goodbye, my mother glancing back once with an expression I couldn't interpret. Was it regret? Sorrow? Or just concern for the family's reputation now that I'd refused to participate in their cover-up? After they left, I called for the nurse. The confrontation had left me shaking and in pain. As she adjusted my medication, I asked, has anyone been covering my medical bills? My parents? The nurse looked uncomfortable. I'm not privy to billing information, but I can have someone from the financial office come speak with you. Later that afternoon, I learned the truth. No one had made any arrangements for my bills. No insurance information had been provided. The growing stack of charges for my emergency surgery, hospital stay, medications, and upcoming physical therapy was currently designated as self-pay, a euphemism for, we don't know who's going to cover this. In the days that followed, my family's abandonment became complete. No more visits. No calls. No texts. The police investigation stalled as they encountered the solid wall of my family's unified story. Jason had an alibi. My father's story about swerving to avoid a deer was plausible given the rural road and the rainy conditions. My account, they gently implied, could be affected by my concussion and the trauma of the accident. Without physical evidence placing Jason behind the wheel, it was my word against my entire family's. And the Mitchell family, with their connections and resources, had considerably more weight to throw around than a 19-year-old college student with mounting medical bills and no support system. The social worker, Lydia, became my most consistent visitor. She helped me apply for victim compensation funds and navigate the bewildering maze of hospital billing departments. She arranged for temporary disability benefits and found a charitable organization that would help with some of my expenses. "What about college?" I asked her during one of our meetings. "I can't go back next semester like this. I can't afford it anyway, now." "Let's take it one step at a time," she advised. "Your health comes first. Then we'll figure out the rest." I nodded, but inside I was calculating all that I'd lost. My family. My health. My education. My future plans. All sacrificed to protect Jason from the consequences of his actions. Through the hospital grapevine, I learned that Jason had indeed returned to our hometown and started his position at our father's firm, as if nothing had happened. Their lives continued unchanged while mine lay in ruins around me. In my darkest moments, lying awake in the hospital bed, I considered giving up. Maybe it would be easier to recant my statement, to fall in line with the family narrative. To pretend the betrayal hadn't happened, or that it wasn't as bad as I remembered. The path of least resistance beckoned, promising if not reconciliation, at least an end to this painful estrangement. But every time I closed my eyes, I could hear them walking away from the crash, leaving me trapped and injured. I could feel the cold rain seeping into the car, the pain of my broken body, the terror of being alone and possibly dying. Some betrayals cut too deep for compromise. I wouldn't lie for them. Not this time. Not ever again. 2 weeks after the accident, I was discharged from the hospital. The question of where I would go loomed large. Our family home was obviously not an option. I had no apartment near campus, having lived in the dorms during my freshman year. My bank account contained barely enough for a few nights in a cheap motel. The hospital arranged for me to be temporarily placed in a rehabilitation facility where I could continue my physical therapy and recovery. The facility was clean but institutional, filled mostly with elderly patients recovering from strokes or hip replacements. At 19, I was decades younger than anyone else there. Physical therapy was a special kind of hell. Learning to maneuver with a full leg cast and crutches while my ribs still ached with every breath required a determination I wasn't sure I possessed. My physical therapist, Keith, pushed me relentlessly. "You're young," he would say when I wanted to give up. "Your body can heal completely, but you have to work for it." So I worked. I gritted my teeth through the pain, fought back tears when my muscles trembled with exhaustion, and slowly, incrementally, grew stronger. But while my body was healing, my mind was another matter. The nightmares came almost every night. Sometimes I was back in the car, trapped and alone, calling for help that never came. Other times I was watching from outside as my family walked away, their backs turned to me no matter how loudly I screamed. I would wake up gasping, drenched in sweat, the sound of rain and shattering glass still echoing in my ears. The facility's staff noticed. They arranged for me to see a therapist, Dr. Morgan, who diagnosed me with PTSD and depression. "What you experienced wasn't just physically traumatic," she explained during one of our sessions. "It was a profound betrayal by the people who were supposed to protect you. That creates a particular kind of psychological wound." I nodded, thinking of the empty space inside me where trust and security had once lived. "I keep thinking I should be over it by now," I admitted. "It's been weeks." Dr. Morgan shook her head. "Trauma doesn't heal on a convenient timeline, Haley. And you're still in the midst of dealing with the practical fallout, your injuries, your financial situation, your educational future. That makes it harder to process the emotional aspects." The financial reality was indeed becoming increasingly dire. The Victim Compensation Fund covered only a small portion of my medical expenses. The rehabilitation facility was only approved by my temporary insurance for a limited stay. The university had put my scholarship on hold due to my medical withdrawal, and it wasn't guaranteed to be reinstated when, if, I returned. A month after the accident, I hit rock bottom. My physical therapy session had been particularly grueling. I had tried to put weight on my leg as instructed and had fallen, jarring my still healing ribs. The pain had been so intense that I'd vomited. Humiliated and hurting, I'd been wheeled back to my room where a letter was waiting. It was from my university's financial aid office, officially notifying me that due to my withdrawal, I would need to begin repaying my student loans in 6 months unless I re-enrolled. The letter might as well have been written in another language for all the sense it made to me in that moment. How was I supposed to re-enroll when I couldn't walk without assistance? How was I supposed to repay loans when I couldn't work? I crumpled the letter and threw it across the room, then buried my face in my hands and sobbed. Everything I'd worked for was slipping away. My family had not only abandoned me physically, they'd set in motion a chain of events that was destroying my entire future. For a brief, dark moment, I considered giving up completely. Maybe my parents had been right. Maybe I should have just gone along with their lie. It would have been easier than this lonely, painful struggle with no end in sight. A knock at my door interrupted these thoughts. When I didn't answer, the door opened anyway, and Nurse Amber Wilson stepped in. She was younger than most of the other nurses, maybe in her late 20s, with a no-nonsense manner that I'd come to appreciate. "Rough day?" she asked, taking in my tear-streaked face and the crumpled letter on the floor. I nodded, too exhausted to speak. She picked up the letter, smoothed it out, and scanned it quickly. Financial aid office. Those people could make anyone cry. She sat down in the visitor's chair beside my bed. "Want to talk about it?" I didn't, not really, but the words came anyway. I told her about the fall in physical therapy, about the mounting bills, about the loans, about feeling like I was drowning with no one to throw me a lifeline. Amber listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment before speaking. "You know, my sister went through something similar. Not the same, she wasn't abandoned by family after an accident, but she had a medical crisis that derailed her education and left her with massive debt." "What happened to her?" I asked, genuinely curious. "She found help. Not all at once, and not in the places she expected, but she found it. There are people and programs out there, Haley. You just need someone to help you navigate the system." "I've been working with Lydia, the social worker," I said. "Lydia's good," Amber nodded, "but she's overworked and has 100 cases. Sometimes you need an advocate who has the time to really dig in and fight for you." "Like who?" "Like me," she said simply. "If you want. I've gotten pretty good at finding resources for people who fall through the cracks." I stared at her, not understanding why this near stranger would offer to help me. "Why would you do that?" She shrugged. "Because someone did it for my sister when she needed it. Because it's the right thing to do. Because I've been watching you fight like hell every day, and I think you deserve a win." Her words triggered fresh tears, but these were different, not born of despair but of the unexpected relief of not being completely alone. "I don't know what to say," I managed. "Say yes," Amber replied. "And there's someone else you should meet." "The guy who found you in the wreck? Ryan Thompson? He's called the hospital several times to check on you. He asked if he could visit." I remembered Ryan vaguely from my first day in the hospital, kind eyes, concerned expression. "He wants to visit me here?" Amber nodded. "He seemed pretty invested in your recovery. Said finding you like that really affected him." I hesitated, then nodded. "Okay. Yes to both. I could use all the help I can get right now." The next day, Amber introduced me to Melissa Carter, a victim advocate she knew through her sister's experience. Melissa was a former prosecutor who now worked with crime victims to help them navigate the legal and financial aftermath of traumatic events. "Your case is technically a hit and run, even though it was your own family who left the scene," Melissa explained after hearing my story. "That qualifies you for additional victim services." She asked if I'd be willing to pursue charges against my family, not just for Jason's drunk driving, but for my parents' decision to leave me at the scene. I don't know if there's enough evidence, I said, thinking of the police officer's skepticism. Leave that to me, Melissa said confidently. There's always evidence if you know where to look. 2 days later, Ryan Thompson came to visit. He looked different than I remembered, less harried, more put together in slacks and a button-down shirt rather than the rain-soaked jacket I recalled. You look better, he said after the initial awkward greetings. Last time I saw you, you were. He trailed off, clearly not wanting to revisit the state he'd found me in. Thank you for coming back for me, I said quietly. I didn't really get to thank you properly before. Ryan shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I've been thinking about you, wondering how you're doing. The nurses wouldn't tell me much because I'm not family. A bitter laugh escaped me. My family hasn't bothered to check how I'm doing, so you're one up on them. Ryan's expression darkened. I heard some of what happened. The nurses talk. Is it true? Your family left you there? I nodded, surprised to find I could discuss it without immediately tearing up. Maybe I was making progress after all. That's. He seemed at a loss for words. I can't even imagine. Neither could I, until it happened, I said. But I'm trying to figure out how to move forward now. Ryan hesitated, then reached for his phone. There's something I think you should know. Something that might help with that. He pulled up a video and handed me the phone. I have a dashcam in my car. For insurance purposes. It was running the night I found you. I looked at the screen, not understanding at first what I was seeing. It showed a rain-soaked road, headlights illuminating the broken guardrail. Then Ryan's voice from off-camera saying he was going to check if anyone needed help. The footage jumped. He must have taken the camera with him, to show the approach to the wrecked SUV. I kept recording because I wasn't sure what I'd find, Ryan explained. Force of habit from my time in the military. Document everything. The camera panned across the scene, capturing the extent of the damage, then zoomed in on me, unconscious and trapped in the back seat. I looked away, not wanting to see myself like that. Skip ahead, Ryan said gently. There's something else. He took the phone and forwarded the video, then handed it back. This footage showed the road above the accident site. In the distance, 3 figures were walking away from the area. The camera zoomed in, and despite the rain and darkness, the figures were clearly identifiable as my father, mother, and Jason, being picked up by another vehicle. You caught them leaving, I whispered, my hands shaking. Ryan nodded grimly. I didn't realize what I was recording at the time. I was focused on getting help for you. It wasn't until later, when I reviewed the footage, that I understood what it showed. Have you shown this to the police? Not yet. I wanted to talk to you first. It's your family. Your decision. I stared at the frozen image on the screen, the proof that my memories were accurate, that my family had indeed abandoned me. Proof that could potentially lead to serious legal consequences for all 3 of them. I need to show this to Melissa, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. She's helping me build a case. Ryan nodded. I thought you might say that. I brought a copy for you. He handed me a USB drive. Whatever you decide to do with it, I'll support you. And I'd like to keep visiting, if that's okay. I feel kind of invested in your recovery now. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of something that might have been hope. I had evidence. I had Amber and Melissa in my corner. And now, unexpectedly, I had Ryan too. I'd like that, I said, managing a small but genuine smile. As he was leaving, Ryan turned back. You know, finding you that night, seeing how hard you were fighting to stay alive even unconscious and injured, it made me think about resilience. About the human spirit. You're stronger than you know, Haley. Remember that. After he left, I sat holding the USB drive, turning it over in my hands. This small piece of plastic contained the truth. Visual evidence of my family's betrayal. It was both painful and empowering to possess. I realized I was at a turning point. I could continue to be a victim, overwhelmed by loss and betrayal, or I could fight back. Not just for justice, but for my future. I pressed the call button for the nurse. When Amber appeared, I held up the USB drive. "I need to make some calls," I said. "It's time to fight back." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity. The dashcam footage Ryan had provided became the centerpiece of a rapidly building case. Melissa arranged a meeting with the district attorney's office, where prosecutors watched the video with expressions ranging from shock to outrage. "This changes everything," Assistant District Attorney Lucas Green told us afterward. "We now have clear evidence placing all 3 family members at the scene and showing them leaving you behind." The investigation that had stalled now kicked into high gear. Forensic teams re-examined the crashed SUV, finding Jason's DNA on the driver's side airbag and my father's on the passenger side. The restaurant staff from that night were interviewed, confirming that Jason had been drinking heavily. Credit card receipts documented the alcohol purchased. My statement, once treated with subtle skepticism, was now taken as fact. The charges being considered were serious. DUI causing injury for Jason, and for my parents, failing to render aid, obstruction of justice, and endangerment. I worked with Daniel Hayes, a personal injury attorney Melissa had connected me with. He took my case pro bono, outraged by what had happened to me. "Your medical expenses alone will be in the hundreds of thousands," he explained during our first meeting. "Not to mention lost wages, pain and suffering, and the cost of your ongoing care. We'll be filing civil suits against all 3 family members in addition to the criminal charges they're facing." While the legal machinery ground forward, my personal situation began to improve as well. Amber, true to her word, had become my fierce advocate. When my approved stay at the rehabilitation facility was nearing its end, she offered me her spare bedroom. "It's nothing fancy," she warned as she helped me settle in, "but it's yours for as long as you need it." Her apartment was small but comfortable, with a ground floor entrance that made it manageable with my crutches. For the first time since the accident, I had a space that felt safe, where I could let my guard down. Physical therapy continued, now at an outpatient facility. The pain was still significant, but I was making progress. I graduated from a full leg cast to a brace, from crutches to a cane. My ribs healed enough that deep breaths no longer sent shooting pain through my chest. Dr. Morgan continued our therapy sessions, helping me process not just the trauma of the accident but the lifetime of family dynamics that had preceded it. "Your parents' behavior didn't start that night," she pointed out. "The favoritism, the enabling of your brother, the expectation that you would sacrifice for the family good, these patterns were established long ago." I knew she was right. Looking back, I could see countless smaller betrayals that had paved the way for the ultimate abandonment. The time my art scholarship ceremony had been skipped because it conflicted with Jason's baseball game. The college fund that had mysteriously shrunk after Jason's reckless spending spree required a loan from the family. The constant expectation that I would be the responsible one, the understanding one, the one who needed less. "I keep wondering if they ever loved me at all," I admitted during one session. "I think they did, and do, love you," Dr. Morgan replied thoughtfully. "But their love was conditional and unbalanced. They prioritized Jason's wants over your needs. That's not how healthy parental love functions." The criminal case against my family progressed, though not without complications. My father hired the best defense attorneys in the state, who filed motion after motion to delay proceedings and suppress evidence. My brother Jason had checked himself into an expensive rehabilitation center for alcohol addiction, a transparent attempt to garner sympathy from the court. More painful was the pressure that began coming from extended family members. My Aunt Claire, my mother's sister, called me repeatedly, leaving voicemails that ranged from pleading to accusatory. "You're tearing this family apart, Haley," she said in one message. "Your brother has a disease. Your parents made a mistake in a moment of panic. Is this vendetta really worth destroying everyone's lives?" I didn't return her calls. This wasn't a vendetta, it was justice. And if seeking medical care for my injuries and holding my family accountable for their actions destroyed lives, then perhaps those lives needed reassessment. Not all extended family reactions were negative. My paternal grandmother, who I'd always been close to but who lived in Arizona, called after hearing what had happened. "I raised your father better than this," she said, her voice cracking. "I don't know what happened to the values I thought I instilled in him. But I want you to know that I'm on your side, Haley. Whatever you need." Her support meant more than I could express, a small piece of family that hadn't been lost in the wreckage. As summer turned to fall, my strength continued to return. I started a blog, anonymously at first, sharing my experience and connecting with others who had survived family betrayal. The response was overwhelming, hundreds of comments and messages from people who had experienced their own versions of abandonment, who understood the particular pain of being discarded by those who should have protected them. Writing became therapeutic, a way to process my experiences and connect with a community I hadn't known existed. I began to consider changing my major from business to psychology or social work, inspired by the professionals who had helped me rebuild my life. Ryan remained a consistent presence, his visits evolving from checking on my recovery to genuine friendship. He helped me navigate the unfamiliar public transportation system when I needed to get to appointments, brought takeout on evenings when Amber worked late shifts, and never pressed for more than I was ready to give. "Why are you doing all this?" I asked him one evening as we shared Chinese food in Amber's living room. He considered the question seriously. "At first, it was because I felt connected to you through finding you that night. But now?" He shrugged. "Now it's because I like who you are. You're going through hell, but you're still fighting, still finding ways to help others through your blog. That's pretty remarkable." 6 months after the accident, 2 significant developments occurred in the same week. First, my medical team cleared me to begin looking for part-time work, a major milestone in my recovery. Second, Jason's attorney approached Daniel Hayes about a potential plea deal. "He's offering to plead guilty to DUI causing injury and leaving the scene, in exchange for a reduced sentence," Daniel explained over the phone. "The DA wants to know how you feel about it." "What kind of reduced sentence?" I asked, pacing Amber's living room with only a slight limp. 1 year in county jail, 5 years probation, license revocation for 3 years, and full restitution for your medical expenses. I considered this. Without a plea deal, Jason faced up to 6 years in state prison if convicted on all charges. But trials were uncertain, and the potential for a not guilty verdict, however small, existed. "What about my parents?" I asked. "Their case would proceed separately. Jason would be required to testify truthfully about their role in leaving the scene." I took a deep breath. "Tell the DA I support the plea deal, on one condition. I want to read a victim impact statement in court before sentencing. I want Jason to hear exactly what his actions and their decision cost me." 2 weeks later, I stood in the courtroom, facing my brother for the first time since the night of the accident. He looked smaller somehow, his usual confidence replaced by a hangdog expression that I suspected had been carefully cultivated for this appearance. My statement was brief but powerful. I described not just the physical pain and permanent limitations I now lived with, but the deeper wound of betrayal. How it felt to hear them walking away. How it felt to rebuild a life from scratch, alone. The worst injury wasn't to my leg or my ribs, I concluded, my voice steady despite the emotion churning inside me. It was to my understanding of what family means. I learned that night that in our family, I was disposable. That's a wound that may never fully heal. Jason avoided my eyes throughout, staring at the table in front of him. When given the chance to speak, he offered a rehearsed apology that mentioned his struggle with alcoholism more than his responsibility for my injuries. I wasn't surprised, but I was disappointed. Even now, he couldn't fully own what he had done. The judge sentenced him according to the plea agreement, adding a requirement for extensive community service speaking to high school students about the dangers of drunk driving. As he was led away in handcuffs, he finally looked at me, his expression unreadable. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered, having caught wind of the unusual family drama behind the case. Melissa had prepared me for this, coaching me on how to handle media attention. I'm grateful for justice being served, I told them simply. Now I'm focused on rebuilding my life. The civil case against my parents continued, with a trial date set for the following spring. Their criminal case was proceeding as well, though more slowly. My father had resources and connections that were proving effective at delaying the inevitable. But I no longer measured my healing by the pace of the legal system. I had started part-time work at a local community center, helping coordinate support groups for trauma survivors. I was making plans to re-enroll in college for the spring semester, with a new major in social work. I was building connections with people who valued me, who wouldn't leave me behind when things got difficult. The road ahead was still long, with challenges I couldn't yet foresee. But for the first time since that rainy night, I felt something more powerful than anger or grief or determination. I felt hope. The wheels of justice turned slowly, but they do turn. Almost a year after the accident, I sat in another courtroom, this time for my parents' criminal trial. Unlike Jason, they had refused all plea offers, confident in their high-priced legal team's ability to cast reasonable doubt on their culpability. They almost succeeded. Their attorneys argued that they had been in shock after the accident, that they had genuinely believed help was on the way, that their decision to remove Jason from the scene was a moment of panic rather than calculated abandonment. Character witnesses testified to their community standing, their charitable works, their reputation for integrity. What they couldn't explain away was the dashcam footage. Those three figures walking away from the crash site, being picked up by another car, making no apparent effort to call emergency services. The jury watched it in silence, and I watched their faces, seeing the same disbelief and horror I had felt when first viewing it. The jury deliberated for 2 days before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. My father was sentenced to 3 years in state prison, my mother to 18 months. Both would be required to pay restitution for my medical expenses not covered by the civil settlement. The civil case had concluded months earlier, resulting in a substantial settlement that covered my medical bills and provided enough for me to complete my education without loans. The family home was sold to satisfy part of the judgment, a symbolic ending to the Mitchell family as it had once existed. As I watched my parents being led from the courtroom, my father stone-faced, my mother quietly weeping, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. There was vindication, yes, but also a deep sadness for what could have been, for the family I had lost not just on the night of the accident but through years of dysfunction that had preceded it. Outside the courthouse, Amber waited with Ryan. They had become my pillars of support throughout the long legal process, attending every hearing, helping me prepare for testimony, providing shoulders to lean on both literally and figuratively. "How do you feel?" Amber asked as we walked to her car. "Hollow," I admitted. "Relieved it's over, but hollow." "That makes sense," Ryan said. "Closure isn't the same as healing. It's just the beginning." He was right. In the months that followed, I focused on rebuilding. I had moved into my own small apartment, decorated with plants and art from local creators, a space that was entirely mine, filled only with things and people I had chosen. I returned to college with a new major in social work and a minor in psychology. My experiences had given me a passion for helping others navigate trauma and systemic challenges. My blog had grown into a support network for survivors of family betrayal, connecting people across the country who were rebuilding their lives after similar experiences. Physical therapy continued, though less frequently. I would always have a slight limp, and cold weather made my once broken leg ache, but I had regained most of my mobility. The surgical scars were permanent reminders etched on my body, but they no longer defined me. Relationships with extended family remained complicated. Some, like my grandmother, had stood by me throughout. Others had chosen sides, unable to reconcile their image of my parents with the actions that had landed them in prison. I had learned to accept these divisions, to understand that I couldn't control others' perceptions or choices. Ryan and I had grown closer, our relationship evolving gradually from friendship to something more. He was patient with my trust issues, understanding of the nightmares that still occasionally woke me in a cold sweat. He never pushed, never demanded, simply remained steadfast in his support. I think what I appreciate most, I told him one evening as we walked along the riverfront, is that you've never once suggested I should forgive them or reconcile for my own healing. He considered this. That's because healing looks different for everyone. Some people need reconciliation. Others need distance. Only you can know what's right for you. What was right for me, I had discovered, was creating clear boundaries. I had received letters from both my brother and my parents during their incarceration. Jason's had been surprisingly sincere, acknowledging for the first time the full extent of his responsibility. My parents' letters had been more complicated, mixing apologies with subtle attempts to justify their actions. I had responded to Jason once, a brief note acknowledging his apology and wishing him success in his sobriety, but making it clear that I wasn't ready for regular contact. I hadn't responded to my parents at all. Maybe someday I would, but not yet. Not until I was certain I could engage without being pulled back into old, toxic patterns. Instead, I focused on building what therapists call a chosen family, connections based on mutual respect and genuine care rather than blood ties. Amber and her husband had become like siblings to me. Ryan's warmth and steadiness filled a different but equally important space in my life. The support group I facilitated twice monthly provided community and purpose. 2 years to the day after the accident, I stood before a room full of social work students, sharing my story as part of a panel on trauma and resilience. I no longer needed notes or preparation to tell it, the narrative had been refined through countless tellings, the sharp edges of pain softened by time and distance. The most important thing I've learned, I concluded, is that resilience isn't about bouncing back to who you were before trauma. It's about growing into someone new, someone who carries the experience but isn't defined by it. I'm not the same Haley who got into that car on a rainy night 2 years ago. I'm stronger in some ways, more vulnerable in others. I've learned who I can count on and who I can't. I've learned that family is defined by actions, not blood. And most importantly, I've learned that there's life, rich, meaningful life, after betrayal. The applause was warm, several students wiping away tears as they stood. Afterward, a young woman approached me, clutching a notebook to her chest. "Your story helped me understand what my best friend is going through with her family," she said. "I didn't know how to support her before, but now I think I do. Thank you for being so open." These moments, knowing that my pain could become purpose, that my story could help others navigate their own journeys, made every difficult step worthwhile. Later that evening, Ryan and I celebrated the anniversary not as a day of trauma but as a marker of survival. We had dinner at a small Italian restaurant, talking about future plans rather than past hurts. "I've been thinking about expanding the support network," I told him over dessert. "Maybe turning it into a proper nonprofit, with resources for people who have experienced family abandonment." "I think that's a great idea," he said, reaching across the table to take my hand. "You've already helped so many people through the blog. This would take it to the next level." I squeezed his hand, grateful for his consistent encouragement. "It feels right, you know? Taking this thing that was meant to destroy me and using it to build something that helps others." As we walked back to my apartment, the night air crisp with early autumn, I reflected on the journey of the past 2 years. From the wreckage of that SUV to this moment of peace and purpose, it hadn't been a straight line, but a winding path through pain, anger, determination, and finally, a measure of serenity. My brother was now out of jail, working at a substance abuse treatment center and maintaining his sobriety. We exchanged occasional texts, rebuilding a relationship that would never resemble our old one but might someday be something honest and healthy. My father remained in prison, my mother recently released and living with my aunt in another state. I still wasn't ready for contact with either of them, and I had stopped feeling guilty about that boundary. "Penny for your thoughts?" Ryan asked as we reached my building. "I was just thinking about how far I've come," I said. 2 years ago, I couldn't imagine a future that wasn't defined by what happened. Now I can see so many possibilities ahead. That's what healing looks like, he said, pulling me into a gentle embrace. Not forgetting, but finding a way forward. I rested my head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. Thank you for finding me that night, I whispered. Not just in the car, but every day since. I'm glad I did, he said simply. We stood there for a long moment, the stars bright above us, the future unwritten but full of promise. The journey wasn't over, healing never really is, but I was no longer traveling it alone. And that made all the difference. What about you? Have you ever had to rebuild your life after a betrayal or unexpected tragedy? What helped you find your way forward? Let me know in the comments below. If my story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more about resilience and healing. And if you know someone who might need to hear this message, please share it with them. Remember, we're all stronger than we know, especially when we support each other. Thank you for listening, and take care of yourselves and each other.